This is Gene Adam, former lead singer of Iced Earth. Be sure to subscribe to Podcast in Stone, and don't forget, join our community on social media. Metal lives.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Iced Earth community, welcome to Podcast in Stone, the only podcast 100% dedicated to iced motherfucking Earth. Today I am joined, as always, by the incomparable Chuck Hoskins, and we are joined by a session musician that has played on my favourite album of all time, Suffolk Week of This Way Comes. He's played on Dark Saga. He's played on the first or the second, I don't know which Demons Wiz album, so I do apologise. But yeah, he's worked with
Demons more than I do.
Demons and Wizards as well. We have Mark Prator with us. Mark, how you doing, sir?
Hey, yo. How's it going, man?
All good.
It's good to talk to you guys.
Thanks for joining us today, buddy.
Absolutely, man. No worries. That's good. It's good to be here. I like the way you say Podcast in Stone. Podcast in Stone. Love it, dude. Sounds killer.
Do I sound like that? Really?
That's cool, man. I'm glad that God had me on here, man. This is really cool. So.
Thank you. So, can you tell us your introduction to music, who your early heroes were, and who got you into music, really?
All right. This is an interesting question because, metal really wasn't my cup of tea in the beginning. I was kind of into the, more kind of jazzy, proggy, fusiony stuff, and of course Rush. Neil's a big influence. Bill Bruford, yes. Early on, those are kind of my influences. And when I hooked up with my guitar player buddy, John Wesley, who ultimately went on to play in Porcupine Tree for 10 years, we met in high school. Like the first song we played together was, I think it was Xanadu or something like that. Like, start to finish. I was like this, 15-year-old kid. So I kind of started there, quite honestly, I lived in Brandon, so we were in the metal kind of scene. It was literally ground zero for, death metal, in my opinion. Starting with Nasty Savage. So I knew all those guys. They're all, Brandon boys. So, ultimately when I started working at Morrisound, I kind of developed an appreciation for, death metal, that art form. So it kind of went from there. So honestly, it wasn't really my cup of tea, for quite a long time in my early, drumming career, so to speak. But I grew to really enjoy the genre in general, just by hanging out with those guys and recording the music and playing some of it, so, and that's kind of, in a nutshell, kind of how I got here. So,
what age were you when you started playing the drums?
I started playing I was about 8 years old when I actually had a drum kit. And it's interesting now because I have drum students now, and my youngest kid is 7, and it's funny, they always kind of get locked in like around 7 or 8, and either they fade away and and they quit very quickly, and they kind of hang in, and then the ones that kind of hang in, it's like they get into the band, they start kind of really rolling. So I was about 8, and just kind of hung with it. My brother played keyboards, and we always kind of played together. So he had this this little broken down upright piano, and I had this little crappy drum kit, and we just kind of go in there and like literally play together for hours on end. He's a very creative guy, and he still plays a little bit. He's now a doctor, an ER doctor, and we got a Pro Tools rig in his house, and we kind of still mess around and do stuff. But we've always kind of played together. You played in bands together, so I was always playing. Even when I was very young. So started doing gigs at 13, 14 years old. Played on my first major label album. I think I was 16 or something like that.
Wow.
So, and I kind of got to know the Morrisound guys way back when at their first studio. And it was a smaller location. Can I keep going?
Yeah, you're good.
We kind of handed them a demo cassette of our stuff very early on, and I kind of formed a relationship with those guys, and I was very, very young. And Jim Morris always kind of liked the way I played on some of that stuff, and CBS was a big label at the time, and they had this pop band in there, and the drummer kind of wasn't cutting it, so they literally called me in like, look, you got to play on this album for like this major label, like as soon as you can, like, okay, like what, next week, or can I get the songs? And now you got to come out tonight. You got to do it tonight. Come over and bring your stuff. So that was kind of my first foray into playing on sessions. Was literally I was thrown into this situation of, high pressure, major label. The drummer who couldn't do the record had to teach me the songs in the studio. So it was a lot of pressure. So, I kind of hung in there. And the album came out really well, and so that was I kind of caught the bug at that point. Literally, I want to play like sessions. I want to play in the studio. This is my world. So, and that's kind of how I got into the business, actually, kind of being the guy behind the scenes, engineering, playing, getting the understanding of kind of both worlds. So it's been great. Done a lot of stuff.
So, you met John and the Iced Earth guys from Morrisound, correct?
I did, yeah. And I think that was, what was the album? It was before Dark Saga, the one before
Burnt Offerings.
Burnt Offerings was an interesting album. I did some of the MIDI programming on that record, and I worked with their original guy, Is it Randy that was the original drummer? Who was their drummer?
Rodney Beasley.
Rodney was their guy. It was Rodney and Randall Shaver and David Bell and all them cats. They all lived in Tampa and rehearsed there. And that was the first album. Tom was doing the album, so was producing the record, engineering the record. Tom Morris, and I was doing a bunch of the MIDI programming on that record. So I was kind of like the second engineer, first engineer guy. So that was cool. So I spent a lot of time with the band at that point. I kind of got to know those guys. And it's like I really learned how to engineer on the drum side, doing that kind of stuff. Engineering drums at the time was in its infancy, as far as like augmenting tones, doing tempo corrections, timing corrections. That was all. We did it a way different way back then. So I kind of got in on the ground floor of that. So great experience actually overall. So, but like I said, I got to know all those guys really, really well. We had a great relationship, got to know John really well. So that was cool. Learned a lot then.
So, what kind of like led you down the path of not just playing on Dark Saga, but also playing on something we could like basically 2 albums back to back? What led to you basically being the drummer for those 2 albums?
Originally, now, Dark Saga, it's hard to describe, politically what was going on, but, John kind of like had really kind of taken over the band and was really kind of trying to really kind of drive everything forward. And he had this concept with the McFarlane thing and the Hellspawn and all that. And cause he was into the whole, the action figures and stuff, and he totally dug it. So the time was fantastic, and the concept of the album was really cool. And he had asked me to play on the album only because, like, I literally had a relationship with Jim Morris at Morrisound, and I knew John. They both know that I played really well. So we all, it's kind of like Jim's like, look, you got to get this guy to play on your album. I don't know what the situation was with the other drummer, Rodney. Maybe he was getting a little burnout or something like that. But I literally rehearsed the album with them at John's house. So anyway, yeah, John and Jim basically had asked me to play on the album. Of course I did. So we rehearsed the album at John's house. And that was Matt, David Bell, me, John. Randall Shaver, I believe, was playing guitar, rhythm guitar. So we rehearsed the crap out of that album. It came out really nice. We went in there, cut it relatively quick. It was a really cool record. It was fun to play on. We got great tones. And it went from there. I mean, and the album after that, I think John was kind of looking for a touring guy, and I really wasn't a touring guy. Wasn't really my thing.
Yeah.
And the next one, Something Wicked, we had, I think Brent came into the picture at that point. Now you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I do believe he taught Dark Saga. Yes, I do believe that's correct.
He toured it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he was kind of in the picture, but I was still had a good kind of rapport with John at the time. So the next album was kind of like, let's just do this other album too. Everybody's here. We kind of got the setup. We kind of have the macro for doing the album. So that's what we did. Cool. Which was cool. So yeah, it was great. I said it was just a piece of cake. So when you get a relationship with these guys, when you cut an album, the next one's always just kind of like, okay, now it's easy. Let's just make a really killer album now. So at that point, it's So anyway, that's kind of how I got those two records done.
It's cool, man. I'm just gonna add Chuck back to the call.
Absolutely.
He's ready to come back. Chuck is back. The Chuckosaurus
Hey,
has
Chuck
arrived.
is back.
Beautiful Skype.
Hey, man.
So,
dude.
So where did we end?
I was just babbling on for like half an hour already, man.
We basically got to
recording, Jason.
Yeah, I've been recording the whole time. I was edit.
I was talking about how my mom met my dad, and
how he was born with drumsticks in his hands, ready to go.
We lost you right when I was about 5th grade, but anyway, I think we spoke briefly about kind of
Dark Saga and Something Wicked.
Right, doing those two albums very quickly, and then I did that Blind Guardian record too. I think I did. It's been a long time.
Demons and Wizards.
Demons and Wizards.
That one. What one though? Hans and Schaefer. Yeah. What one? What album was it? First album or second album?
It had to be the first one.
Okay, yeah.
From what I read today, he played on the first one and did some engineering on the second one.
Thank you. And thanks for correcting me. I appreciate you guys staying on the ball there.
I can't think who played on the second album. Was it that Raphael Ciani? Saidi? I forget the guy. I don't know his name.
I could look if you want.
It's irrelevant. Hello. It's irrelevant for this interview.
It's funny because these little spin-off projects, that kind of came and went, that were kind of interesting, And I think I met Hansi very briefly. I tracked the record. I think it was just very limited. Me, John, and myself, and Jim Morris, and as I recall, and I think Hansi came in and did the vocals and stuff like that. But they had collaborated on the demos, before we tracked the records. So that's kind of how they'd done pre-production, I guess, over there. So yeah, that was an interesting record too. Different kind of music for sure. A different kind of vibe that record.
Now, have you kept like in touch and followed where Iced Earth have gone since your kind of session time with them?
Yeah, I've been in touch with John a couple of times, and of course I follow Brent Smedley online. We kind of say, hey, how's it going? While he's on tour, he's just crushing it out there. So it's just nice to keep a rapport with him. And of course, David Bell, I can catch him online once in a while. I think he does some aerospace thing. But we all cross paths, here and there. And recently, you guys, I don't know if you heard, but Ralph Santalla passed away.
Yeah.
And he'd kind of been in these circles with all of us guys. So when he fell ill, he was at the hospital. A lot of guys kind of were showing up, and it's bittersweet because you're making these connections again with these people. But unfortunately, it was a really horrible situation because Ralph was literally, in the ICU, and but once again, we reconnected with a lot of people, and that was a very cool thing.
Nice.
Yeah, that was a sad day for a lot of people.
Yeah, it really sucks.
Especially
Yeah,
like
that was tough.
friends and family. Like, we paid tribute to Ralph on one of our episodes. We made like a graphic that said basically, he's going to be missed, and his contributions to Iced Earth and the metal world will always be there and always be remembered for that.
I mean, he knew a lot of people. He had a lot of friends out there. Just a sweet guy. Anybody that knew him, very, very intelligent, very, very cool dude. We had a lot of laughs, bro. Because Ralph and I did the tour with Sebastian Bach with Steve DiGiorgio. we did a couple of tours with him. Actually, when I did a couple of tours, man, it was like never had so much fun. It was a blast. So yeah.
What was the years that you toured with Sebastian?
That was 2005. And it was pretty brief. I did a couple of quick tours. Ralph got me the gig because he'd been writing an album with Sebastian. But that's 2005. I could have continued the project, and then I kind of branched off and kind of did some other stuff that was non-music related. So I had kind of went on a musical sabbatical for a while. Okay. But yeah, it was cool.
I used to go see Sebastian a lot when he had Richie Scarlett in the band, because I'm a big Richie Scarlett fan. So anytime that he came around with Richie, I would always go see him. So
he had a lot of dudes in his bands. He had a lot of revolving doors there. It was interesting. So, but now he's familiar doing. I'm sorry to cut you off, but his drummer now is it's a monster. Who's this guy? He plays the backwards cymbals. I'll think of the name and I'll blurt it out in a second.
Okay.
His current guy is a monster. Is California dude, Bobby Jurzombek.
Okay.
Killer player, man. Great dude. Super cool guy. So yeah.
Nice.
Anyways, that's not Iced Earth related. Sorry about that.
That's okay. This is
sidebar.
It's cool.
I'm a big Hair fan, so I also seen that you did some work with Michael Tramp also.
Oh yeah, I did a couple
from White Lion.
Yep. Yeah, so he came to this. He's a Danish guy who lives in Tasmania, right? But my buddy John Wesley had done some stuff with him, and so I did a couple tours with Michael Tramp, my buddy John Wesley. Once again, it was just like, it's surreal because it's like you see these guys and these are guys that were multi-platinum artists, and now we're doing these medium venues and just small gigs and just having a blast. It's very cool stuff. You really you just develop relationships with people over time. And I'm going to tell you a little quick side story because it's pretty funny. But anyway, Danish guy, lived in Tasmania. Did a couple tours with him. 5 years go by, and I'm on tour with somebody else. I think the guy Fish from Marillion. So we're like in Denmark, and our guitar tech had he was diabetic, right? So he was crashing in the middle of this restaurant after load in. And literally, we had to do a takedown on our guitar tech in the middle of this restaurant in Denmark. Who walks in? Mike effing Tramp. So that was kind of cool. Like, once again, there's that connection thing. You always kind of run into these people, over time. So that was a cool little story. But that was Mike Tramp.
I missed a little bit when I was disconnected. Was it ever considered you being a full member of Iced Earth? Did you cover that, or?
Honestly, I don't know that. I don't know if I was ever officially asked to do it. I kind of thought it was, I don't know if I'd have kind of given John like that vibe of like, I kind of want to just, play on the album and not really tour. And it was totally cool too. Because it was like, maybe he just understood that I wasn't really mentally really wanting to tour a lot. But I mean, it's totally cool. I don't know if I was ever really asked to do it, and I turned it down. But it was never really a thing. Hey, you're going to do the tour. We're going to do this. It was kind of like, did the record. Let's go to my next thing. So, at the time I was kind of doing other projects too and playing on other things. So that was kind of my my focus was kind of playing on the records, and I was starting to engineer more stuff. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like I was kind of in that world still. So it was never really a thing.
Okay.
But yeah, it would be cool. But yeah, I can take it or leave it at the time.
How does it?
So you didn't end up playing any live gigs then?
Never played a live Iced Earth gig. Oddly
Okay.
enough, yeah. As much as I've worked with those guys, and that's totally cool. Like I said, they've always had great live guys. So, and I've always appreciated that. So it's always kind of cool to see, when you do the record, go see how the stuff translates with other guys. And they always pull it off very, very well. So that's never really been an issue, So, yeah.
Like I wanted to say, like, you're saying, like, you kind of just stuck as being a studio guy, and that's all you really kind of wanted to do. How does it feel like, for me, like, Something Wicked This Way Comes is like the best album ever made, and you drummed on that. So how you know what I mean? Like, for me, that's just like that album is like the best album ever. I love it to death.
Cool.
Your
you like it. Yeah.
Your drumming's incredible on it as well. Same with Dark Saga. Your work is great. So.
They're different albums too, aren't they? I mean,
yeah.
Kind of stylistically, there was a little shift from one to the next. That was very cool. To me, Dark Saga was a lot less technical. Obviously, a lot of guys will say that.
Yeah.
The next record, production was a lot different. The macros were different. The way we did stuff, but it was kind of like we took the game, kind of went to there a little bit. And everyone kind of stepped up on that album. So yeah, that was cool. It did. Like I said, that working with those guys, John Schaefer, Jim Morris, all them cats, it's just like, it's awesome. It's a great experience. And there's my dog. And, but it was a very cool time to make those albums. And it was great for John, too. I mean, obviously, John really, really worked that band. I mean, he really single-handedly, I hate to say it, but single-handedly did a lot of hard work promoting the band, beating up the labels, hammering guys. He did a lot of, I literally would go over there and rehearse at his house on the phone constantly when he wasn't rehearsing, just talking to his label guys, getting them on the ball. I mean, definitely my hat's off to him for that. And I really appreciate guys that really do all that work. And that's kind of what he did. So, and I always kind of respected him for that. So that's kind of why we always kind of worked together really well, because I always appreciated his work ethic all the time. So, and for some reason he liked what I did. So for whatever reason that worked out. So, it's and still to this day, we still have conversation. It's always very cool.
When we had our interview with him back in October, he did say that you groove like a big dog. That's how you described your drumming.
That's kind of how I got the gig, because I guess I could. Once again, I don't really see it when I play, but that's what they tell me is you just kind of have this way of making the songs groove really well, and I'll take it. It's cool with me.
I do have a question about when you were tracking those two Iced Earth albums. How much creative control did you have for laying down the rhythms and the grooves? Was it all kind of planned out by John? He knew what he kind of wanted for the drums?
Yes and no. I mean, I was allowed to do whatever I wanted to do. So usually in a collaborative environment, if everyone's kind of like musically on the same kind of par, so to speak, when you're collaborating with people, you'll try things, right? You're allowed to try things. It's not like, look, you got to play this fill here at bar 185. It was always kind of like, just to kind of see what happens. And then if we do something, usually what would happen was I'd do something that sucked, and everybody at the same time would go, that sucks. Let's try something else. It was always very supportive, very cool. So yeah, I was pretty much allowed to do anything I wanted to do, given parameters, given the structure of the song, what kind of parts we're playing, suggestions from producer, John, other guys. So it's a collaborative thing. But yeah, I was definitely allowed to do pretty much anything I wanted to do. And when you work with guys that you really respect, and everything they do is kind of there's musical agreement, so to speak. Usually you're going to do stuff, you're going to go to things pretty quickly that work pretty well and just refine those things. So that's kind of what was going on. And I think that's maybe a big part of why John liked to work with me, was we could literally weed out all the bullshit stuff really quick and just get to the stuff that was really pertinent and important for the music, and then, go on to the next thing. So, and that saves time. You're not, there's not, and I'll back up and I'll say, I've recorded a bunch of drummers too. And for me, it's a struggle when I'm working with a guy who is really married to his ideas, and everyone in the band's like, he's in the other room and we can talk about it. And the band leader's like, I hate that fill. And I'll talk to the guy, look, everyone hates that fill. Do something else. And it becomes this adversarial thing. It's not a supportive thing, because the dude you kind of get this kind of, it becomes a power struggle, with me being a drummer and an engineer. So that's the problem. You got to drop that. You got to drop that ego. That's the hardest thing to do. So that's one thing I've always been able to do really well, is just take the ego, check it at the door, and work with musicians and able to take all those suggestions, kind of put that into something that kind of works for the good of the music and the good of the album, good of the project. So that's always the most important thing.
Yeah. Like I've always gone, like, I'm a drummer as well, and I've always gone by the mantra, like, you serve the music, not yourself. I think that's the most important thing when it comes to music in general. And no matter what, it doesn't matter what instrument you're playing. You've got to serve the music first. What I love about your drums on those two Iced Earth albums is that you are serving the music, and it's very kind of stripped back. There's not some, you're not going fucking crazy with rolls. You're just keeping it tight, just locked in, and that's it. Just makes the songs that much.
Yeah, I'm glad you noticed that. And that was the vibe. Was it's not. I'm not there to show off any technical thing. I'm there literally, number one, everything's got to support musically what's going on lyrically, and as you guys all know, in my opinion, John Schaefer's the best rhythm guitar player in the world, bar none. The way he plays those rhythms, nobody does it like that. I mean, no one comes close. So that was kind of like, to me, that really the important vibe was to really support that stuff rhythmically. Once the drums are done, then they start layering stuff, making it killer. But once again, there's that kind of mutual respect thing. It's like, I know at some point he's going to take over. That stuff's going to happen. You have to leave a certain amount of room for that stuff to happen musically. You can't just throw a bunch of crap out there in the music that they got to weed through and play around. It's got to be like everything's got to kind of lock together and have this cathartic, symbiotic thing that makes those albums and those songs. So, and that was, once again, back at the time that we were making those records, that stuff was going on, and we were allowed to do those things and musically kind of play those parts and refine those things. And we had the time and we had the budget to do it back then, so it was very cool.
Which one of the two do you think turned out the best between Saga and Something Wicked? Do you have a favorite of the two, or?
It's hard to say because they're conceptually different albums, So, I mean, I liked Saga for a lot of reasons. I mean, I thought it was lyrically and like all the vocally speaking, there was a lot of really cool, catchy stuff to hang on to in the music. And of course, there's a story getting told in there, right? And Something Wicked was, slightly different. There's more riffage. There was more twists and turns. So I like them equally for different reasons. I kind of almost hold them up in the same kind of vibe, But I almost would say kind of Dark Saga, only because it was the first kind of album that, I'd kind of done in that way with these guys. And it became something really cool. It just the record kind of blew up a little bit. It really kind of took John up there to that next level in Iced Earth.
For sure.
It put him on the map a little more. So I would say it's got a little more emotional value for me for that reason.
Nice.
And like you were saying about, like, it's more kind of like there's more hooks Because I agree, like, Dark Saga is a very hooky, very singable album.
Yes.
And the hooks get in your ear, and they don't leave.
And of course, Matt Barlow.
He's the greatest of all time. I'm sorry.
What a cool voice! And here's the funny thing was, when we were, it kind of freaked me out a little bit because when we were rehearsing the songs in John's house, we wouldn't play let's play this bridge section and get this tight. Let's play the verse section. Matt would sing every time we'd start playing. He's doing full on vocals. There's no little sectional rehearsals where it's like just drums and bass. It's like always the whole band is on. Matt is always singing. That freaked me out because it's like, dude, you don't have to sing. John's like, yeah, let him sing. It's kind of like, oh, cool, dude. But it's kind of like I didn't need it to get through the songs, but it's just like that work ethic thing again. So I was kind of like everybody was always on the ball. Everybody always knew where the parts were and sang the parts and played the parts. So that was a cool thing about Matt. The dude worked really, really hard, Matt. And a great killer voice, totally down to earth, cool guy. So I got totally lucky. It could have been,
right.
They could have been a bunch of dicks, and just hardcore, high pressure situation. But it was just like, the pressure was there, but it was just like, what a great, supportive musical vibe it was with those guys, And we were all there to make a really killer album. So that's what we got.
Right. Now, I'd also like to talk to you about, you have an engineer credit for Days of Purgatory.
Yes.
Do you remember your involvement with that one?
Vaguely. I was pretty young. When I got the job at Morrisound, I was kind of like, I played a bunch of club gigs and I toured a lot. As a young guy. Then I was like wrapping cables and making coffee. And I think it on that record, I tracked some stuff. I made it work on some keyboard parts, with those guys, because back once I think on that record, we would kind of like there was Studio A, Studio B, the MIDI room. We're doing all the keyboard stuff, so I was kind of doing some of the peripheral stuff at the time, and making coffee and wrapping cables and taking notes, So eventually, the more you work on records like that and the more you're involved in those projects at that level, it's kind of a grunt. They kind of give you more responsibility. Excuse me. And I think at the time that's kind of what was going on. I was doing a lot of assistant engineering, a lot of second engineering. They call it second engineer. It's like the glorified coffee guy that will do cassette dubs. But then, like I said, I was allowed to do a lot of more stuff on that record. And I don't know if this Sabotage was doing a bunch of stuff at the time then, but I started really honing my engineering credits on some of that stuff too, with those guitar players, Chris Oliva and those guys. So once again, it was this really cool kind of microcosm of music happening at Morrisound at the time. And I would just show up every day because I'm on a schedule. I show up every day and I'd be on this record, I'd be on that record, I'd do this, I'd do that. Really cool time. So, and it all kind of blurred from one thing to the other. You're doing so much work. And eventually, you'd be assigned to the one project. So you'd be there with the engineer in the morning. You'd leave when they were done, and you're literally kind of part of the process at a certain point. So I think I'd done a lot of everything on that record.
Okay.
I don't know. Did they specifically give me credit for anything in particular on that record?
It just has you as one of the engineers on it.
Yeah. So you eventually you're allowed to do more kind of cool stuff. And when I say cool stuff, it's like you get to press the red button, you get to record a vocal, you get to record a guitar solo. It's just and then it just builds up. You get more confident because at the time it was analog, right? So when you hit the red button, you're recording. Either you can record over something that wasn't supposed to be recorded over, but back then on analog recording, it's destructive editing. You hit the button, whatever was there gets erased. It's gone forever. So it's way more important to make sure you're punching stuff in. So yeah, that was cool. A cool time back then for me as an engineer, honestly.
You eventually kind of led you to having your own studio.
Yes.
Red Rooms. Am I correct? Is that the correct name?
I managed to find this coffee mug in my cabinet.
Plug away, sir. It's all good for us.
But yeah, at the time, my buddy and I, John Wesley, he had kind of been doing more projects, and he was like, "Look, man, I'm going to buy some Pro Tools gear. We're going to start doing my records and start demoing out my stuff at my house." I'm like, "Yeah, cool, whatever." So we basically put a rig together at my friend's house just to demo out our own stuff. It wasn't really meant to be anything. And quite literally, we're unpacking the gear, and like there's friends of mine. Hey, dude, heard you got a studio. It was kind of like, well, who told you that kind of thing. So literally, before we could even start our own stuff, we're doing kind of sessions already with my friends. So it was just kind of like this word of mouth thing happened, and it just kind of went from there. It was never really meant to be a thing, but we did it for 10 years. So we just kind of kept doing stuff we just cherry picked, basically. We just kind of did the crap we wanted to do. So now we always work with friends of mine, guys that I got along with. We did Andrew WK back then, some of his early live stuff. Worked with Sean Malone, Gordian Knott, did some of that stuff. And even Scott Burns ended up doing a mix session over at our studio on something. I think it was a Gordian Knott project with Sean Malone back in the day. But so yeah, it kind of became a thing. So it was kind of cool. And once again, it's kind of like it's kind of a progression, I think, for an engineer to kind of start doing your own thing. Can you pick that up, son? Pick it up and hang it up. Pick it up and hang it up. Sorry, my son's still here doing his deal. So, but anyway, that was we kind of still have the room. And once again, we're starting another project of our own there. So it's kind of a private studio now, but I still do outside projects, on occasion, if I have the mentality for it. I'm 54 years old now. It's kind of like, another project. Okay, well, do I like you? Or it's kind of like, so the older you get, the harder it is to kind of hop into a project. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Right.
Yeah, it's still going. We're still doing it, And Morrisound's still going too. I've got a session there on Friday. I'm playing drums on with a local guy on Friday over there. So everyone's still kind of clunking along,
Nice. Yeah. As an engineer / producer, do you ever hear something you were part of, like maybe 10 years ago, and are you hard on yourself? Do you second guess it, or how do you usually feel listening, a decade later at something? What's your mindset when you hear it?
The only time I kind of kick myself a little bit is when I didn't put my foot down enough and say, "Look, man, you guys just got to spend more money. We got to take more time. This has got to be right." It was kind of like you're always working within a budget. That's the bottom line. You're working with, and that's what a producer does. Producer is an engineer that gets production fee. There's no difference. All producers are engineers, technically, but that guy's in charge of the budget. He's the guy. So, and with my producer hat on, my client would say, "Look, I've got this much money to make this record. You either say yes, we can do it for that, or no, we can't do it for that, or somewhere in the middle, we can try to do it for that, and do the best we can given those parameters." So, and that was always where I would kind of regret from records in the past that I produced, engineered, was, I kind of heard rumors that someone didn't like the way it sounded, or, you hear it. You pay attention to what people are saying. You watch the blogs, you read the texts. So at some point you take it personally, but you're not going to go into a big dialogue about, well, they wanted to spend $5,000 on the record. They didn't have enough time. The drummer was terrible. X, Y, Z. You just don't go into it. You have to kind of detach from it. But yeah, I certainly regret, allowing stuff to go out there that I thought could have been better. And there's tons of stuff I'm proud of. So you take the good with the bad, right? I mean, stuff's got warts on it, and you gotta let it lie and kind of go to the next thing. It's like playing drums, right? I mean, you'll do a take that, is not the best take that you've ever done in your life. And at some point it's just like, it's kind of good as I can do for now. Let's move on. Maybe I can come back to it. And you kind of got to let stuff go. Sometimes you got to kind of detach from that stuff. So I've kind of learned to do that.
Nice.
You probably hate tracking me then, because I get very angry when I fuck up a take.
Oh, I've been there. I've worked with the guys who
I'm
get
like,
mad.
fuck,
Oh, yeah.
I get one. Like, it's funny, like you were saying about working on a budget and stuff like that, and you know, budget will determine how good the production is at the end result.
In a manner of speaking, yeah, you can't
It's
have
like I totally can relate to that. My band, we've been going to the same studio for a while. I've known the owner for about 12 years. I'm pretty good friends with him, and he offered to do our 3-track like demo for about $150.
Sure.
But we basically his caveat was like, it's gonna be on my time when I have time, basically. So it was like
Sure.
a 2-year process to track
Yeah.
these 3 songs.
Yeah.
And we regret the whole process because it just doesn't
Yeah.
sound good. You know,
Sure.
it doesn't sound bad. It doesn't sound
That's
like
the trade-off. I mean, there's always a trade-off in there. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, at this stage of the game for me, it's really time, budget. It's really more time for me now than anything.
Yeah.
And I'm always up against. You've got these guys together, and you're trying to get as good a performance out of these guys as you can, and you're not going to get as good as I want ever. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we're perfectionists to some degree. At some point, you have to let go of the fact that this guy is as good as he's going to be, and we got to kind of make do with that performance and these takes and these tracks and these tones. Because everyone plays a different way. There's some drummers make a drum kit sound totally different than the other drummer. So there's so many factors making an album.
Right.
Now speaking as a producer, that you're up against. Back when I was at Morrisound, when I first started working there, a cheap album was $10,000. That was a cheap album. I mean, think about that now. I mean, that's awesome. $10,000? Are you kidding me? I can get hotel rooms. Like we can, whatever. But back then that was a cheap album, and some of those metal albums back then were getting like 50, 60, 70 grand and more, budget wise. So there was really no excuse back then to make a bad record. But of course, studio time wasn't cheap either. But yeah, I mean it's tough. I mean, yeah. So we're there's a lot of factors in there that go into making an album that normal people don't really appreciate. I guess I'd say.
So I've always wondered, like, did you like charge per hour when you used to record?
It's usually an hourly rate. An hourly rate. Yeah, and that's kind of a good benchmark. And for us it only worked well because it's hard to go, look, I'll do your album for X. Mm-hmm. The problem is you don't know what you're up against. I mean, the album, you may charge them X to do it, but it may cost you a heck of a lot more than X because, you're dealing with schedules and guys that can't play good. And you're doing more editing and more quantizing and more, and So to us, the hourly rate, and Morrisound's the same way. It's always been kind of like an hourly rate with them. Generally speaking, it just kind of works better that way. Also, it kind of keeps people on point. It keeps your clients on point. Everyone's like, we got to be on the ball. We got to have stuff dialed in. We got to be rehearsed. We go in there and we're on the clock. There's always a nice component to that, that they know that, it's an hourly rate. We got to get this tight. We can't just mess around and burn time. And, back then we did a lot more pre-production too. In other words, the producer's job would go rehearse with the band, do pre-production, get the songs tight, know what the songs were, know what guys were playing what parts. So there was more work, in the interim before the record got cut back then too, with some of those records that had budgets,
And then I just want to go back to you saying about basically a cheap budget would back in the 90s was like $10,000, yeah.
Yeah.
10K. Yeah. About like maybe, I don't know, like 5 years ago, 2013, 2012, something like that. I was in an old band and we had 9 tracks, and we emailed the studio in London, which were quite herald for kind of like a low budget kind of metal kind of recording.
Right.
And they for 9 tracks for 7 days they quoted $2,000. Now
Yeah,
you that now
not
you
bad.
yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
For
In
10
London, no less. You know, it's just rents are super high there, so
yeah, yeah.
overhead's brutal. You know.
Because I budget baffles me, the idea that in your mind what does $10,000 get you if that's a cheap album, like because
Yeah, no,
I find it very difficult to like go, right, what's the production
it's hard.
gonna
It's
be
hard
like?
to relate to. You know.
So is it like less time to master, less time to mix? How does it work? How does that budgeting work?
Well, yeah,
You know?
that's where your limitations are. It's all
Exactly,
about
yeah.
time. It's
Yeah.
all about time. So, uh, and you know, the kind of the unfortunate thing was usually when I was working with people that were somewhat inexperienced. Nicholas, get the door. Sorry. When people that were somewhat inexperienced, is we spent a whole lot of time tracking and overdubbing and dialing in the vocals. And then at the end of the chain during the mix, which is the most important thing, there'd be the least time left for the mix. So it's kind of like the album's all tracked, all the overdubs are done, everything's chopped, and now we got 3 hours of mix. The whole so it's kind of like you're up against the wall now. So, and that's kind of where you need to spend the most time is really in the mix. So there's a lot of it's communication too. So it's hard to really say. Now, and then be bands that would come in there and have everything totally rehearsed. Players were great, and you'd go in there and press record, and everything sounds killer. And the takes, you can get stuff done in a couple of takes, and the album just kind of flow. It's just like there's a huge, vast chasm of difference between musicians that can really play and are really great at their instrument. How that affects the budget and the time allotted for an album. Hey,
it's just it's funny when you're just saying $10,000 is a cheap record.
It was at the time, yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say that's still a lot of money to me, but that's just me.
Oh, it's ridiculous, right? I mean,
yeah.
That's what the labels were paying. They were paying that kind of money.
Yeah.
Want to walk out of here? My dog is totally blind, so she can't see anything. So like if she feels something move, it's like she'll freak out. So yeah, but now with workstations, with Pro Tools and whatnot, we've kind of gotten the record. We've cut production costs because a lot of people literally can retract stuff at their house. They can take the time into overdub. They have way more time to do stuff and refine their parts. So that's been a boon and a bane, only in the sense of they're kind of bringing back really crappy tracks. That I don't know where the files are. So it's good and it's bad.
And I think with the upgrade of technology and like the digital age, I think we've kind of, especially in music, I think we've lost a bit of humanity in performances.
Absolutely.
Because you got samples. Your drummer can play the part, but if that part's not perfect, I just put a sample in there. Just put we'll just move that kick drum a bit there so it's on click. There's
right.
I
call it band by proxy or album by proxy. In other words, everyone's mailing their parts in. Everyone's someone's out of state. They're sending in their tracks that you send a 2 mix to, and back in those days we really rehearsed the record as a band. I mean, what a concept! I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, that seems to be kind of a lost concept now, and it's not really an accepted way to do a record now. That's not the macro anymore. Now the macro is like, I got some guitar parts demoed out with a click track. I want you to slap some drums on it, and then we'll have so and so do the bass parts, and you're literally, it's all file management. It's not an album. You're managing files together. So it's unfortunate that it's kind of gotten to that point. And it's like I said, the days where we used to sit there and like work the takes and refine these parts to perfection, and edit parts and like listen to it back, in the demos and do the soul searching on it, keeping songs or getting rid of songs or those days are gone. Unfortunately, it's kind of that's a lost technique, and that needs to come back. And you hear that records that were done that way. You kind of hear that, musicians playing together on an album. What a concept.
The biggest example for that, considering it's like a 1990 record and it was analog recording, is Judas Priest's Painkiller. The drums on that record are on point. Like, the guy is just fucking slaying.
And for the most part, the guy's playing from the beginning of the song to the end.
Yeah.
For the most part, now back in the day, once again, in around that time, it was pretty widely known that you really couldn't punch in drum tracks that easily. It had to be a pretty open spot or a pause in the song. Or you do a razor blade edit, but it was really hard to like punch in drum takes back then. You always hear it. So there wasn't a lot of that done back then. So that stuff that was done back then, in the days of analog, I mean, there wasn't a lot of editing back then. I mean, that stuff was played really, really well.
You had to know your shit. That's
really cool. Absolutely. So, I kind of miss those days. Unfortunately, it's time. I mean, we all have careers and we all have stuff to do, and it's kids, and what are we gonna do? Rehearse every night, after work, and it's brutal, So the albums are getting longer, I guess, to make now. So, I mean, the last album I did with my friend John Wesley was it was really cool because we actually got to sit there. We spent about a year demoing the songs. I would literally go in every day. This is like drummer to drummer kind of thing. But I would go in there. We had all the songs, kind of the tempo maps, all kind of built with all the markers. Right. This is the chorus. We had fleshed out the arrangement really, really hardcore. And I'd go in there, and there was a demo of the drum track that I played like a year ago. But I'd go in there, get the multi-tracks going. All the kit was mic'd up. I just go take after take after take after take. 20, 30 takes in Pro Tools. I do a bunch of takes until I got it to where it felt good. Then I would start keeping takes, and then I'd do the comp. So it's like I get to a point where it felt good, and then I would do like 15, 20, 25 takes. And then I'd take the song home on my Pro Tools rig, and I'd comp all the takes together from all the good takes. So it's just like you're trying to get the best of the best. So you kind of get yourself to where kind of like you're in the zone, and then just start plowing takes, mistakes and all. So that was a cool way to do a record. And we got a killer record, that time. So, but literally it took a lot of time. I mean, every day I'd show up every day, and in some days be like, fuck it, I suck. I just go home, slam the door, disgusted. But the next day it's like, killer take, let's move on. It's kind of like this emotional roller coaster's going on, the whole thing.
Isn't that a similar? I swear that's a similar way that Lars Ulrich done his drums for the self-titled Metallica record. They kind of chopped up the drums for all his best. There's
a lot of composite takes. It's pretty widely done, from the day that we could do it. I mean, the first time I saw a Pro Tools rig, I was like, "Oh, hello, where you been?" It's kind of like awesome. And I remember doing a Morbid Angel record, the Domination record, and the guy who did some of the editing on that record worked on some of the Metallica stuff back in the day. So he was one of those LA Pro Tools guys that would literally sit there and chop drum tracks all day long. So he was 24/7, had a gig doing some album all the time, stuck in a closet somewhere chopping drums. And we brought him in on the Domination record at the time, and he literally sat in a closet for a month, 12-hour minimum days, chopping. But that was kind of widely done. It was a thing. So, and it's still done. Now, mind you, the last couple albums I played on, stuff wasn't chopped up so much. We tried to get the take, So it's all. And the thing is, once you get the take, sonically things are so much better. When you have the take, there's, engineers can kind of hear the edits. They can hear the crossfades and all that stuff. You kind of get used to hearing it. But when you hear songs that were like tracked like just a nice clean take, and there's no timing issues. There's kind of no edits. It's kind of like so much more depth in the song sonically. And we've kind of missed that, in the industry in general. We've kind of lost that thing.
It's like there's like a thing of insta-fix now. You can't sing? Don't worry. Pitch correction.
Lining up vocals. I mean, they can literally take a guitar chord now and, Melodyne can pluck out some of the notes and kind of tweak. It blows my mind at how cool the algorithms are. But at the same time, let's be responsible for our own musicianship. Let's learn our instrument first, and then if we got to fix a couple of things, sure, fix a couple of things. But let's not get bogged down in the technology of getting deep into these edits and just kind of overdoing it. We kind of get addicted to it. Unfortunately. I have a production question. I've always been very curious about song sequence. As a producer, how important is that? And is that something you have a say-so, or is the band leader usually the one that decides this one's track 1, this one's 2? And ultimately, how important is that? Well, I have this conversation constantly with people. And, obviously, that like in the iTunes era and the Pandora era, you're not like hearing the album. You never really hear the album. I had a conversation with, Steven Wilson a couple of years ago. And he was always very concerned about people not hearing the sequence of the album, how crucially important it was for him that people hear, song 1, 2, 3, 4 in that order. Guy's a total purist in every sense of the word, listens to everything. He's a very talented songwriter, musician, producer. You've all over the place. So these conversations with him were very interesting because it rings very true. The album sequence is really important. And it's really more important than the listeners kind of really get, because they're hearing, like on iTunes, they'll get the album, and iTunes may put the song out of sequence. They may put it out of sequence, and they may put it in order of, like, the more popular songs in the album get shuffled first. And I don't know how the algorithm works, but it totally wrecks the sequence. I think it's a problem, and I think it's important. And most songwriters, they factor in the album sequence. It's really It's really an important thing, So I get it.
In today's age, John Schaefer actually brought this up when we spoke to him, and it's totally right. People don't absorb albums from track 1 to the end. They just want to have playlists and just shuffle tracks. One of my favorite things that I like to do in my spare time is put a vinyl on, just spin it, flip it, spin it, listen to the whole record.
I used to come home from my day job, exact same thing. I put a record on, put the headphones on, crank it, lay down on the floor with a record sleeve, and just let the whole thing just play. I mean, right? What's that about, right? I mean, that was awesome.
Skip.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
so I know artists are very concerned about that. I think it's still very important to artists and songwriters that album sequence is very, very important. Unfortunately, what are you going to do? I mean, you want to sell your album, you got to put your songs out there in a certain way, So your back's against the wall, I think, to some degree.
Do you usually try to put the one that you think is the big hit one?
Oh, yeah, good question. Usually. Now, back in the day when we did like a Warrant record back then, and some of these pop bands, and that was always a big thing. You don't kind of want to put the best song first. You want to kind of hide it in the record a little bit. And of course, the label got rolling and go, put the best song first, right out of the gate, and so everyone kind of had a different concept about it.
Okay.
Usually the songwriter would have a more esoteric concept of where those songs would go. But of course, label guy always wants, the best song, whatever, and all the other songs, who cares? So, but yeah, it's that's kind of something as a producer I never really took part in. I always kind of left that to the artist. It's always kind of like, look, what's the song order? You guys got to figure it out. Think about it. And even when we first started editing albums together, and even on analog tape when we were splicing together albums, the masters on half-inch tape, even the spacing between songs we labored over that stuff. The crossfades. If a song doesn't have a crossfade or an intro track or secret space after the album on the CD, secret tracks, all that crap that was always cool stuff to do back then,
Right.
So, I miss that stuff,
I've always thought, as a musician, I've always thought like, for me, it's still, if you're going to talk about like track listing and what how the album should go, I always feel like what flows correctly, what flows right.
Exactly.
It's
all about how it flows. Yeah.
What naturally comes after each one, and it actually feels right.
I mean, imagine like Operation Mindcrime out of sequence. It just doesn't work. I mean, the story's not. It's all disjointed, right? I mean, you're kind of telling the story musically, whether it's a concept album or it's not, but you're musically telling a story. It's got to have, you got to have your up-tempo song at a certain point. You got to have the kind of the ballady song. That's got to be in there at a certain point. The last song on the album is kind of important. It can be like the kind of weird song, but I mean, so there's always these emotional factors that go into the sequencing of an album. And it's great that we're talking about album sequencing because to me, it's still important. And I still deliver albums to record labels and duplicators in the sequence. I still deliver, they call it a DDP file set, which is like the sequence as we intended it, with the spacings all correct, all the crossfades correct, all the intervals correct. So I still send up records like that to the label, and I try to get them to use that. That way they can't mess with it. They can't, like some dude in the duplicating labs, like he can't shuffle the songs around. He can't change my crossfades. He can't change my spacing. It's all been talked about and discussed and dealt with already with the band and the songwriters and the creative parts of the band. So very important.
Now I've got a question that still on the topic of song sequencing, like it's like basically translating the song sequencing back to live. And when as a musician, when I got to playing my like first bunch of bands and the first few gigs, we would get the advice of like open with a banger, end with a banger, because the crowd only remembers the first song and the last song of your set.
Yeah, absolutely. That and yes, the funny thing too is when these guys are structuring their live show, that set list is so important. How you put those songs in that set list is crucial. It really is, man. Because it's like I'll go watch shows and like loving the band, and it's just like, oh, what happened to the set? It's kind of I don't know. I kind of like they lost me somewhere, like at a certain point.
Right.
It never picks back up. So, and then you'll see a band that's like set list was killer, songs were in the right spot. Beginning to end, it was great. They picked me up, they dropped me down, they picked me up again. So it's like that's really important. So, and you'll see bands that structure their set list live. It's not the album. They structure the live set list a certain way, and that's really, really important. I definitely agree with that for 100%.
Yeah, my band we spent like a couple of weeks deliberating live set lists.
Important. And when you rehearse the live show, you got to play the set. You need to play the whole. You can't just like we're going to rehearse these songs today. Like when I did the Sebastian Bach gig, we would go in his basement every day for rehearsal. He had this huge basement, really cool, just huge basement with a bunch of Kiss memorabilia and junk laying around. Mm-hmm. And we'd go in there, and we would play the entire set, A to Z, and sometimes we'd play it twice. But that set list, how you segue the songs, that stuff is all completely planned out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the show. I mean, the show has to be structured accordingly. Very important.
Yeah.
Just a side question to that. Do you think Skid Row will ever get back together?
Like the original guys? No.
Yeah. No.
I don't see all those elements ever working together. From what
I've heard, they were close a few times.
I believe it. But
if they said that about Guns N' Roses though. Like, Axl and Slash are never going to get back together. It's never going to happen. And guess what?
Right, Sebastian and Axl have toured a lot together too, so it's like they probably put the bug in each other's ears all the time, you know.
Right.
But yeah, you see those, you know. I no. How about that? I'll go on record. And I'll just say no, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Whatever, you know.
Right.
You know, I love Sebastian, man. Super cool dude.
I got to meet him. He's a really cool dude.
Over the top, totally gung ho, totally love him, man. Great guy, man.
Huge Kiss fan he is.
Dude, it's ridiculous. Ridiculous. How many times we sat up in his house till 4 a.m, drinking wine, smoking weed, watching bootleg Kiss videos. Awesome. What great times, dude. Never forget.
The time I got to hang out with him, that's exactly what we talked about.
He's totally in. I love it. He's got when he had a house in, one more quick story, but he had a house in Lincroft, New Jersey, where we rehearsed the band, and it was old, broken down. I think it was a Trans Am or like an old Firebird, like covered with leaves in the front. You had a cover over it. Like, what's that Trans Am? Like, dude, Ace Frehley signed the dashboard, man. I can't get rid of it. It's like, you know, it's like, oh, got it. Sold. It's like, I think just sat there. It was.
I know that story.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that car, man. I never looked inside because it's kind of an old car, but it's ready to get, like, you know, attacked by something. But yep, that's for real.
We have some really cool viewer questions that might take a few minutes. So
yeah,
Jason, do you have those ready?
I do, yes. And there's obviously like always, I'll skip what we've already covered, so you don't have to repeat yourself. Right. We've covered that. Usually we'll find the first few questions we've already kind of talked about. Right. John Baylor asks, how was it to work on the Demons and Wizards album?
John. Yeah. Well, it was a real technical project for me. As I recall on this record, this is the kind of point in those albums where there was a lot of collaboration between John Schaefer and the producer Jim Morris. And I don't know how much you guys know about how much, you know, they really kind of did a lot of collaborating together. Both extremely talented guys at what they did. But at that point, the macro got changed up a lot, and you know, Jim Morris would have John literally, you know, flesh out the arrangements in demo form with, you know, some of the, you know, a couple rhythm guitars, maybe some vocals. All the drum parts were in there, and it was, you know, drum machine, whatever. But the parts were kind of there, and it was a basic concept of how the tracks would go down. And it was even we got so tech on that one that I would literally be sitting there with my headphone rig on and watching the drum parts scroll by with the arrangements and all, like, the markers and all the cues, kind of like reading sheet music, but just to have a framework for the song. But that was kind of a cool way to do it. For me, it was great because I'm a studio guy, so it's like, yeah, I got this. So, but that was kind of the first time we'd kind of gone that deep into kind of pre-production and demoing the songs, and you know, kind of getting from A to Z. So they literally, you know, my job was very short. I didn't rehearse those songs as much on that album. I lived in the studio for a couple of weeks doing that record. But it was super cool because it's like I put my headphones on, drums sounded killer. I knew the arrangement. You know, I had all my cues in there. I wasn't missing anything. He even actually put a couple fills in there that I kind of, you know, oh, that's cool, Phil. I'll try that. You know, so they'd done a lot of thought beforehand about how I played stuff. But once again, back to our questions from before of, you know, he allowed me to do whatever I wanted to do for the most part. So, you know, I always took everything that was there with a grain of salt. And they always told me, like, look, the drum parts, they are what they are. It's, you know, a couple of guitar players' idea of how drum parts should be, and they were still great programmers. So that was a cool way to do a record. And I haven't done many since that were that really kind of cool and tech, because no one no one really grasped the technology as much as those guys did. So, so that was really cool. I really enjoyed doing that record just for that reason.
Nice. It turned out really good. Heaven Denies is just an amazing song.
Yeah, really cool stuff in there. So, it was challenging for me too, obviously, because you're having to kind of grasp someone's concept of what this part is, and you're either going to adapt it somewhat to your own kind of style, or just play that. Sometimes playing that was really what you really had to do, and it was like we'd sit down, we'd listen to a take, and we go, you know what, man, I think what you had there is kind of better than what I'm doing. I think let's do what's on the page and see how that sounds. And ultimately, every once in a while, the stuff they had already fleshed out was kind of the go-to thing. So, but you always have to allow yourself that flexibility, and they always allowed that flexibility to happen, which was very cool.
Cool, man.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Ulysses Hernandez asks, what is your favorite all-time Iced Earth song? Tough one.
There's a fast one on Dark Saga that I liked that song. It was it talked about the Malebolgia character.
Violate.
I think Violate. Yeah. Yeah. That one kicked my ass. That was a really tough song, but just a super fast. The riffs were killer. It wasn't the longest song in the world, honestly, but that's probably one of them. I think I had a lot of. That was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. That one, I left a lot on the drumsticks on that song. And a lot of takes too. So that's probably one of them. I mean, there's a lot of them. Cool. John's a great songwriter. I mean, what can I say about it? That one sticks in my head.
This next guy, David Abel asks. David Abel asks. He has a few questions actually. Why is his recording studio named Red Room Recorders? Is this a reference to the Illuminati? And when is he going to finish my drum tracks? With about 1,000 question marks at the end. Yeah,
I'm sorry to say, Dave, the Red Room has nothing to do with the Illuminati. I think it's because the place was red when we moved in, so we called it Red Room, and it kind of never looked back, And about your drum tracks, give me a call sometime, pal. Hello, Dave, man. Dave's a cool dude, man. We spent a lot of time together, man. So yeah, Dave's doing well. I think I saw him a couple years ago, and we worked on the Unearthed thing together.
Yes,
did that thing. That was cool. So. Yeah, we always cross paths. We always stayed friends. I got great respect for the guy, man. Cool dude. So, hope you're doing well, Dave. I'll talk to you.
We had him last month as a guest, and he's a fantastic guy. He's very funny.
Yeah, he's very, very to the point too. Hey, when are you gonna finish my tracks, man? Come on, man. Of course, he's very, very down to earth, obviously. So. But yeah, he's talking about a project. He's talking about something. So we're gonna hope he puts something together here. So
that's super cool.
Yeah,
I'm gonna butcher this next guy's surname because it's like a foreign surname. I cannot pronounce it, but his name is Haris Avarovic. I'm sorry, Harris, but I've completely.
Does it say where he's from?
No, just it's like
okay.
I've butchered his name, but he just says hello, Mark.
How's it going, my friend? Nice to meet you.
Nice.
All right. A virtual meet. Fantastic. But it's nice to hear from fans, we're doing the Sebastian Bach tour. We did a couple of signings and meet and greets, and I signed more Iced Earth albums than anything else, man. It was a very cool experience, So it's nice meeting fans and chatting with people. And I always try to chat with people when I can and spend a little time, when I can. So I usually meet Iced Earth fans doing other stuff, so it's always very cool that they remember.
Sebastian was giving me shit because I showed up with like one Skid Row record and like 4 Ace Frehley things.
Yeah, right.
For Richie Scarlett, and he says, "You're not here to see me."
Dude, what are you doing?
He did look at all the Ace Frehley stuff though. He's like, "Let me see that."
Crazy, right? I mean, he's just totally he's I wouldn't say obsessed, but he's a great custodian of all that stuff too. He's got a lot of cool stuff, man. Really cool stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Andrew Edwards asks, if you had the final say, what would you have done differently on Dark Saga and Something Wicked?
I really can't answer that. Only because it's not my project. It's it's hard to say. I mean, I think once again they're kind of different albums. So
Something Wicked is perfect, so you can't change anything on that.
Thank you.
See, Dark Saga is
in my
perfect.
opinion,
you have to put your faith in the guys that are doing production and the guys that are writing those songs. And so as a sideman, which I was, I collaborated musically on those albums, quite a bit. But at the same time, it's like, look, man, this is a creative entity of somebody else. And from a production standpoint, of course, Jim Morris producing those albums, what can I say about that? They're impeccable records sonically. So, and I've always loved his production style, and I've always had 100% confidence in stuff that he did. And I could always hand him a record and go, "Hey, mix my record. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye." And then just take the record back. "Oh, sounds killer. Okay, next." So, when you have that kind of confidence and faith in people that you work with, like I said, what would I do different? Any regrets? Probably none on those two albums. I think those were two really, really good albums in my career, if not the best. So, I guess that's my answer, really. Yeah, there's no answer,
Yeah, cool. I don't know. I've not heard the context of this next question. I've not picked up on this, even if it's a real thing. But Douglas Rosanda asks, "What's the story on the bum snare hit in Violate?" Now, I've not heard a bum snare. I've not heard a bum snare hit.
You're going to make me go back and listen to it now, aren't you? But, well, very good question, and thanks for bringing that up. Thanks for pointing out all my flaws. I'll go check it out.
I don't remember
I'll tell you what. On an up note, it's awesome to know that people really, really listen to stuff, man. They really, that's super cool. I mean, so yeah, definitely, I'll definitely take a listen to it, and maybe we can do a follow up answer to something. Oh yeah, on bar 89, whatever. 30-second note. So it's Violate. There's a bum snare hit. Now I got to go find it. Cool, man. I mean, look, it's an organic, real thing when you're playing on an album.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. So could be a bum snare hit, and we could have left it in there on purpose. So every once in a while, they kind of just do that just to leave the wart in there, so to speak. So pretty cool question. I like that.
I know when I track, especially when it comes to snare, I try to rim shot every strike, and sometimes you're not going to get the perfect rim shot.
It's funny when you're playing that rim shot. There's a lot going on there. You gotta, I mean, honestly, to execute a rim shot, the tip of the stick's got to sink into that head and make that contact right with the rim and the head. No one realizes how hard a rim shot is, but it's
like my favorite thing to do. I love the sounds. It sounds amazing.
It defies logic that that a rim shot can actually work. But it's hard to get that. You're trying to hit that and be consistent.
Yeah.
No one really. I guess people do, but these metal drummers and these death metal drummers, man, it really is an art form. And these guys technically are quite unbelievable. And watching these guys play and recording these guys, you really appreciate it. And then because when you try to play some of that stuff, I've played some of that stuff. I mean, you appreciate it for what it is. I mean, I talked to I can't think of his name now. He's a DW endorser. He likes snakes. Plays. I'll think of him too. He played with Eric Rutan's project. But he always told me, like, playing as fast as we do and some of the stuff, you gotta play it all the time. You can't take a pause for like a couple of days and then get back to it and be on the ball. You gotta, like, when you're in that mode and you're playing that kind of material, it's so hard to stay at that level. You're like this hyper focused kind of technical level. So, but yeah, you definitely appreciate those guys, man, because that's really an art form to me. It really, really is. From a drumming perspective, sure, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree. Ed Matthews asks the question that everybody's wondering right now: will you be involved with the new Demons and Wizards?
I'd like
album?
to. I'd like to, but you know, I mean, it's been a long time, you know. So exactly. What's up, bro? I heard you doing something else. I don't know. I mean, I don't think so.
Right.
There's a big announcement coming this Saturday.
We'll have to hold our breath for that one. But it would be nice. I said I could take it or leave it. I mean, I love those guys. They're all great friends of mine. They do what they do. If I get a phone call, it's all good. If not, I don't.
I reckon this is a bait and switch. Saying that, and the announcement's going to be Mark Prator on drums. That's what it's going to be. Right.
It'd be cool because it's always great working with those guys. You know. Yeah. It's been a long time, so I don't know.
It's been like 12 years since the last Demons album. It's been a long time.
Thank you. I know, right? So time flies, man. That's for sure.
Dominic Blum asks, what is the story behind the nickname The Creeper?
I'm
not familiar with this, so this is news to me.
I think that used to have something to do with kind of the way I would kind of sneak into the studio. It's a long time ago, but we used to kind of like during rehearsals and stuff like that. I just kind of somehow became known as the Creeper. So John knows me as the Creeper. That's kind of my thing. And yeah, it used to kind of be how I used to kind of creep around. I was kind of a stealthy guy back in the day, and I get in the studio late or I get there early, but I was always kind of like creeping around doing stuff. But I was kind of behind the scenes in the shadows. So, but yeah, he kind of gave me the nickname and it kind of stuck. I mean, what can I say? You know, no one else calls me that. That's kind of John's thing. So, once again, it's like, yeah, John's a friend of mine. I'm cool. I'm totally cool with it. So, it's all good.
Last question of the day for viewers. Charlie SB Noza, I probably butchered his last name as well. Oops, sorry, mate. He asks.
Espinoza. His name sounds familiar. Okay.
He has a engineering question. But I think he's got a few questions. Okay. He asks, how did you mic up guitar and bass cabinets on the different albums? I'm guessing he's talking about the two albums that you did with Eartth, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I can give him a quick overview on that. I think he may have actually asked me this question online before.
Okay.
I basically back then, from my recollection, stuff changes over time. Microphones change. Technology changes. We used a Sennheiser 441 and a Sennheiser 414. Say this is the 414 and this is the 441. So you can see, 414 is like a large condenser, large diaphragm condenser. This 441 was kind of that Stevie Nicks, that kind of looked like a square, like a fuselage of a plane, kind of a long microphone. We kind of put it on plane on one speaker, and there was a 421 on another speaker. So it was a Sennheiser 441, AKG 414, and then a Sennheiser 421 on another cabinet. Or a 57, Shure 57 on another cabinet. That's the best of my recollection. Now, obviously, being 3 mics on a cabinet, there's phasing issues. So you got to make sure those phase coefficients are correct. So you always kind of mess with those levels. And once things were set, we'd tape it down. It never moved. And most of the time, the bass guitar was an EV RE20. The old, it's a voiceover mic. You've seen those. It's a really long cylindrical gray mic. It was either called a PL20 back then or an RE20. And the nice thing about that bass microphone for the bass guitar was there's no proximity effect on the microphone. And I hope he's following me on all this conversation. But what that means is The low end doesn't change when you pull the microphone back away from the speaker. So the low end stays the same relative to the frequency spectrum. So those mics were great for bass guitar. But I will say this, back then we used an Ampeg SVT cabinet on a lot of those records, and it was a consistent cabinet. So that cabinet was on a lot of albums back then, that SVT cabinet. And some of those guitar cabinets were consistent back then too. The amps may have changed, but there was a couple of Marshall cabs that we had there back in the day that were kind of our go-to cabinets, or at least one of those were used on most of those projects, if not both of them. So yeah, I hope that covers all that. Thank.
He also asks, how were you able to get the best performances from everyone?
That's the proverbial question, isn't it? It's kind of like just developing a rapport and a comfort level with people. It's really about making people feel comfortable. Making sure all the cues and the monitors were correct. And we would spend more time getting a headphone mix, really honestly, than almost sometimes than doing like setup. That was really super, super important, getting the player comfortable kind of in this headphone environment, because it's kind of an oddball thing. And there's a certain art form to kind of getting these guys in the room kind of in this sterile environment to be kind of relaxed and play the music, and kind of, at least, especially like metal with the intensity, it's easy to sit in the chair and kind of like your technique changes. You got to kind of like play like you're playing. So there's a lot of factors in producing a band and producing people and engineering stuff. Even engineering, you're producing too. So you're trying to get takes out of people. So it's about kind of comfort level, knowing if someone's getting tense or uptight, or if you're flogging apart too much and you can move on, knowing when to kind of make those calls, and having that kind of look ahead, that kind of that presence of mind to know if someone's kind of like getting nervous, or they're uncomfortable, or time to take a break, or time to keep going. So right. There's a lot in there. That's all kind of producer stuff. So it's hard to do. It takes a lot of experience. You have to work and do a lot of records before you kind of get to that point. So there's no real quick way to do that, other than you just got to do it a lot, So
keeping on the same topic. This is gonna be the last question from me. I'll let Chuck ask anything he wants to ask after this. With that in mind, trying to get everyone comfortable and getting there playing their parts, has there ever been like a situation where a musician is just not on point, and maybe it's your job to say, look, you got to go home, you got to learn your parts, and then come back, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Has that happened?
We had a saying at Morrisound when that happened. We call it somebody got dunce capped. Basically, what it means is, go home and learn your songs, basically. And I've done it. It's really hard to do. It's a fact of life, man. It's like, look, you're going to spend a lot of money and we're going to flog these songs and it's going to be terrible, or we figure out some way, take a break. And it's basically putting the dunce cap on. Like, look, go sit in the corner and learn your parts, and then come back, whatever. So it's a real thing, man. It happens. And look, if someone dunce cap me, I'm like, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Totally cool. It's different with me because I can kind of detach a little easier. But some people don't take it well. I've seen musicians like I said, for example, the first record I ever played on for a major label, I replaced the guy in the band on the album, and the dude had to show me the parts in the studio. Jim Morris will remember that. So you can imagine the kind of how tense that was. Like the dude showing parts that he couldn't play right. So,
wow.
So, that's a real thing, and it can be a brutal world if, like, for example, like, drummer ain't cutting it, guitar player, bass player's not cutting it. Like, someone's got to play those parts. But you got to get it done. So, either you're going to play the parts, we got to get it how to do it, or we got to have more time for you to learn it. So, totally happens.
Do you see that as that? Do you see it as an engineer? Is that part of your job to make that call as well?
That's usually a production call, or it depends on my relationship with the band. If I'm the engineer and I know that something's kind of falling apart, I may take somebody aside and go, this guy really ain't cut it. What do you want to do? I mean, we can plow through it and keep going, or, but sometimes you have to keep your mouth shut because it's not your place.
Yeah.
Once again, I've spoken out of turn and it's been uncomfortable. So I've made the mistake of trying to do the solid and do someone a favor and say, look, you're lacking in this area. This has to be fixed, and paying the price for it. But you have sometimes if you're passionate about what you do, you have to do those things and take the heat.
Yeah. Do you have any final questions, Chuck, before we wrap up?
I don't have a final question. I just wanted to say thank you so much. I was looking so forward to talking about Saga and Something Wicked, but I enjoyed the engineer production end of it so much that this has been a real treat for us. I love that we kind of got the other side of this. It's been very educational and fun.
Snare note for sure. I got to go back listen to Violate and get that out. So
we'll talk about that at part 2 down the line.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by like behind the scenes when it comes to producing records and stuff. That's always fascinating.
I love it.
Like my favorite part of being a musician and being in a band. I love playing shows. Don't get me wrong, but I love going into a studio and seeing all the parts come together. That's one of my favorite parts of being a musician. It's so satisfying and cathartic and just so. And I'm a big fan of like Glenn Fricker from Spectre Sound Studios.
Okay.
Do you know who he is?
I've heard the name before.
Yeah, he's got this YouTube channel, so I watch a lot of his stuff. So I'm really quite interested in like the producing side of stuff. So it's been really cool to hear your stories and like what you do behind that kind of curtain, I suppose.
Yeah, it's been pretty cool, man. I'm in a kind of unique kind of position in the business that I played on some killer records and I've engineered some really cool records. So kind of gives me a nice perspective. Also being a drummer. It's good. Once again, it's great working with great drummers because for me it's easy. It's difficult working with drummers that I may intimidate sometimes, and that's not the vibe for me. It's like I'm on your side. Let's kind of do it like this is my experience. This will work better this way. So, there's been conflict, but there's also been really great collaborative things. As an engineer, also as a drummer. So. Plus, for me, it's frustrating as a drummer when I'm working with an engineer that's like doesn't have his thing together. He's not great at the workstation or something like that. I'm kind of like, look, stand over here and let me just do this edit really quick, and then I'll go back out and I'll do another take. And I'll bring my Mac and I'll network my Mac with their rig and say, I got this. I'll just press play.
Just do the whole album yourself.
It's hard not to take over because now I can literally take over. So, but it's been a great. It's been a great thing, though. So
yeah, Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a blast.
Absolutely, anytime.
You've played on the best album of all time, in my opinion. Something This Way Comes. It's my
favorite
album ever.
It's been great, having a chat with you guys, man, for sure. It's been really enjoyable.
Yeah. So
anytime, like I said, anytime. I'm gonna go find the snare beat on Violate. We'll get back. I'll let you know where it is.
We'll talk about that at part 2 for sure.
Send us a time code so we can show everybody that you found it.
I'm going to edit it.
I've never heard it, so it's news to me. But yeah, thank you, Mark, for coming on. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching our interview with Mark Prator. It's been fucking awesome. Some really good insights on this one. So look forward to the next episode. What is next episode, Chuck? I don't know. It could be anything, really. So anyway, thank you for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. Stay metal because metal lives, my friends. See you later.
Guys.